So I do think, at least from what I've seen since starting this business, that yes, we can eat the banker's lunch, and we can do something in banking as a tech startup. And I certainly feel that we're not doing enough. So I took this 20-25 minutes to try and inspire you to do something in banking. Because if we start looking into, you know, what is life going to be like in a few years? So let's take 2020. You know, computing in 2020, we're probably going to wear computers. We're going to have watches. We're on the way. So there's definitely a sort of a lot of progress happening in how we're going to do computing in the future. I initially wanted to show this picture of Robert Scoble, but I thought after lunch that wouldn't be a good idea. So he's testing out Google Glass, and for me this is pretty much the synonymous now with Google Glass. Then news, like, do we really think that we're going to read newspapers in 2020? I think we will do, but only basically hipsters who think that reading newspapers is cool, not because they want to get the news, but they just want to be seen reading newspapers. Like, you know, with turntables. You don't listen to turntables for music, you just want to be cool in the pub. So what do we think about money? You know, do we think that people are going to queue out of bank branches like they do today? Because there's, if we start thinking back in the last sort of 10, 20 years, not a lot has happened in banking. Banking still works very much the same way. There have been a couple of interesting things recently. So there was PayPal. I think PayPal is probably still the biggest thing that's happened in banking. And more recently, we had Bitcoin, which is very exciting, especially for someone who's wondering what money is going to be like in 2020. But unfortunately, it's so from what we've seen today, the way that banks and governments have reacted to Bitcoin, we're probably not going to have at least that kind of Bitcoin as our money in 2020. I don't know if you've heard of that. There's I don't know if that's how the ring is meant to look like, but the idea was that you could carry your wallet in your ring, and you basically pay with Bluetooth when you walk past the counter. I mean, that would be a pretty awesome replacement to your bank. It's unlikely that it's going to happen. But why should we try and do something in banking? There are a couple of reasons for that. So first of all, over the last, say, 40 years, banking is essentially a tech business. So before doing TransferWise, I used to work for banks, for big banks, and really, it was basically their IT department who was running the show, and then, you know, there's some marketeers around that and people in the branches around that, but it was really the tech that determined how banking was done. So for tech startups, you know, you're already there. The other thing that it's a bit of a misconception is people think that banking is hard. You know, Google Maps is hard. Amazon Cloud Services is hard. Banking is complicated. You know, this is two different things. There's nothing hard about banking. It's actually very, very simple, especially if you have an engineering mind. But it gets complicated as you're dealing with other people's money. But that's not a reason not to do it. The other thing that I think people do realize, that there's a lot of money in handling other people's money. So the opportunity is enormous. I'm going to show you on the next slide what we believe banks are making on international payments. But if you look up the 50 biggest banks in the world and their revenues, not for the last couple of years because they took a lot of stupid losses, but from their transactional services, they are making a ton of money. And, well, we're all paying for it. So if any of you guys want to tackle that, there's a chance that living will become cheaper for us, as we don't have to pay that much. And the last thing that I particularly like in our business is that people already hate banks a little bit. Or in some countries, they hate them, you know, quite a lot. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them definitely being that financial services are not transparent. So people feel that although the banking sort of sounds free, they're ripped off in some way. You know, you only have to look at the bank's profit and loss statement to understand that actually they are making money somewhere, and they're making money off us. So that's a good reason to come in as a new player and come in as a fair player. So next I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about what we did. What is the problem that we solved or are in the process of solving, and what are the lessons that we learned, so that, you know, if you decide to tackle some of that banking world, then you have, you know, some guidelines. And that's it. So again, the pixels are a bit small. So what happens when you... A bit of background to the story. So when I'm originally from Estonia, and I moved to London about 7 years ago now. And I had that problem that I was making quite a lot of money working for banks, and I had to send some of that home to my savings account to pay for my mortgage and all those things. And I did what everyone else would do. So I went to my HSBC bank, an awesome bank all around the world. I clicked on send money overseas, and I typed in how much I want to send, and later I found out that I lost about £17 for the payment, but also there was the exchange rate that the bank used was sort of 3% off what I was expecting when I was looking at Reuters. So I realized that in order to send money from one country to another, and that was for my savings fund where I was hoping to make 3% in a year, I already lost 3% just in a couple of milliseconds for converting the currency. And when you start looking at it, then the personal payments that go cross-border, plus small businesses who all do exactly the same. They go to their bank, they type in, I want to send money to Germany, to Switzerland, to England, to the US. We pay about $100 billion in banks' revenues every year. And just, you know, $100 billion is a huge number. So that is about 70% of Ukrainian GDP. So imagine if 70% of all Ukrainians worked for banks or gave whatever you do to the banks. That's how much money is being made on us. And depending on the country, so in Scandinavia, this is pretty good. You know, using banks is not so bad. In Western Europe, it is horrible. So sending money overseas usually takes sort of, you know, you never know how long it's going to take, but they say 3 to 5 days to be sure. You know, sometimes a couple of weeks later you find that it still hasn't arrived, and then you start looking for it. So the experience is not great. I hated it when I had to do it years ago. But I was lucky. So I hated it for a couple of reasons. First of all, I really hate to give people money for something that is not worth that much. So it's almost like taking a taxi from the airports and giving them 5 times the price, although you know that they should only charge you 50 hryvnia or something like that. So I was lucky. I had a friend who had exactly the same problem, but in the opposite direction. So he was being paid in euros, but he was living in London at the time. So he needed pounds for euros, where I need to convert my pounds to euros. So what we started doing was, instead of both of us going to our bank, I put my pounds into his bank account, and he put his euros into my bank account. So effectively, I got the euros, he got the pounds. We looked at the exchange rate on Reuters to work out what how much of euros and pounds we should exchange. And we paid nothing to the bank. And we felt awesome for it. So, of course, we just kept doing it without, making a big fuss about it, as we had our lives to live. And we brought some other friends into this. Whenever someone needed to convert their money, there was a little Skype chat. We called up, so who wants to convert 5,000 euros? And hey, there was always someone. So we did that for a couple of years to realize that we've sort of saved tens of thousands of dollars. Not tens of, but above $10,000. So we decided to make this into a business. And we called it TransferWise. So what happened is, basically the idea was, we don't need to go to the banks to pay a high fee for a high margin to convert the currency. We could just convert the currency between ourselves. Or in the case of TransferWise, between our users. So there's always money moving from Europe to United Kingdom and vice versa. So we should just use the money that's already there and match it in a peer-to-peer way. We launched in January 2011. And so far, the number that we're really proud of is we've sort of saved about 15 million in banking fees for our customers. So this is about 30 Porsche cars that the bankers didn't buy, thanks to the service. That is where we're really, really proud. As Frederick mentioned, we took some money from some kind people. Peter Thiel, who started PayPal. I said before that I believe still PayPal is the only meaningful financial services startup that has ever been built. Maybe we'll get Square, but I'm not sure whether that's going to yield anything. We have Index Ventures and Naya Ventures from London and New York. We're now a team of 45 people, thanks to the kind people who are supporting us. We're in London, we're in Estonia, and we're also in Ukraine. And as you might have understood from the earlier slides, our objective is to make a $100 billion business into a $10 billion business. I think that quote actually came earlier from the MySQL founder. And they said that we want to make a, equivalent $10 billion business into a $1 billion business and then have half of it. So we probably want to have like 20% of the $10 billion business, and that would be already pretty good results. So lessons, so that's what we've done, but I'm not here to talk about what we've done. I'm here to talk about the lessons learned. So when you're gonna go and build your next tech bank, then there are a couple of guidelines for you. So first of all, the difference between a photo sharing site and a bank is that you have to earn trust. Initially, we had no idea whether a couple of guys from Estonia would anyone trust their money with us. We were very skeptical. So what we did was, when we launched in January, we had January 2011. Basically had this article in TechCrunch. You can't read it, but it basically says TransferWise launched currency exchange. And we were really surprised when, 15 minutes later after that launched, 2,000 euros hit our account, and that was the maximum limit. And then a little bit later, a few £1,000s came in, and then euros again and pounds. So basically, by the end of the first day, we had our accounts full of money, so we needed to start actually making payments. This was awesome. Just, well, thanks to TechCrunch probably, and a bit of the sort of social proof there. But we got off the ground, people started trusting an online service. So, but really, it is very hard. So, we thought it was impossible, but we found out that it's just very hard. And a couple of learnings there that make a huge difference. So first of all is the experience. As long as you give your customers like 200% of the experience they were expecting, as long as you wow them, they will trust you. And there's a lot of things in the online experience you can build, but also offline experience. So for example, again, it was two guys that were both employed when we started this business. When the article went out, we're doing a full-time job, and we knew that the only way people are going to trust an online business is if there's a phone number. So we put a phone number out there, and the thesis was that actually you don't even need to answer that phone. You just need to have the number there. And so we got an outsourced service that a receptionist picked up the phone, a real person, took the notes, that yes, this is the issue, this is the question, and then one of us later, after our working day, then called back to the customer and explained, how they can use the service. But every interaction you have, the more trust you build in your customers, and the customers bring new customers. There's nothing else that works better than customers bringing customers. That's to the second point. So something that you can do from the beginning is social proof. The simplest, what you see everywhere of social proof is to see reviews, or see how many, if your Facebook friends have liked the page. So this is like the basic social proof. If you get a little bit further from that, then you want to think about who you're going to bring in as your investors. So having someone like Peter Thiel supporting you is, puts a lot of trust in people who you're going to work with. And then the last bit, which is also important, is that you have to, and this is also easy to achieve online, you have to invest a lot in sounding and looking professional. So a good example, so down here, fortunately you can't see it, it says IDCEE. So that's a typical blunder. I think the conference we're in is IDCEE. And if you have that on the home page, no one would trust that you would know what to do with their money. So you have to, things like the text, the words you use, how you sound on the phone. This is incredibly important when you deal with other people's money. But it's not hard, it's just complicated. The next point, so first point is trust. Incredibly important, but possible. Hard, but possible. Customers and that is not only financial services. I believe that goes for every startup, that customers are incredibly important. And understanding your customers is something that I find is almost the most important thing that we can do in our business. So we've created, on our walls there are little sort of customer profiles. We have a Jane and a Holger from Germany, and a student who's moved from Czech Republic to study in London. And we sort of have modeled out what they are, why they're using TransferWise, what is the benefit that they expect, what they like, what they don't like. And we sort of try to assess, okay, we have 50% of Holgers and 20% of Janes, and then 30% of people who we don't really understand what they're doing. And this is really important to have as a sort of an ether around your team. You should make sure that you speak with your customer on a routine basis, but also that your product teams and developers speak with your customers. It is, I mean, the one thing that you can't go, the one thing that you should spend more time on, however much time you spend on it now. And then the last thing that it's important. I only brought out 3 things. So trust, customers, and speed. So something that we work very hard on is, you know, how do we not become a bank? We've grown from 2 people 2 years ago to 45 people today. So we're growing like 2 or 3 times every quarter, every year. And we're getting slower, and we feel it. And it's an uphill struggle. The more people you bring in, the slower the team gets. But speed is really the only advantage that we have against, well, in our case, the banks. That's the only advantage, that we move faster than the banks. Therefore, they can't catch up with us. And it's the same with your competitors. So we're seeing now, 2 years later, that people get excited by TransferWise and the story that we have, and the money that we raised, the customers that we have. They also want to start international payments businesses or currency transfer businesses. But as long as we're moving faster than them, there's no way anyone's going to catch up with us. And I've seen too many startups lose focus on growth. If you have a chance to, if you haven't yet read Paul Graham's story on growth, you should read it. I met a couple of Y Combinator startups last week in the US, and the one thing that unites them and was so awesome to hear is how they all think about growth and only growth. So there are people who hand out flyers in the churches and do all sorts of crazy stuff, anything for growth. So, getting to the end of it, as I said before, the idea is to give you some inspiration of taking on some hard, like, not hard problems, but complicated problems in banking. So, the first thing is, what do you think that people hate or don't like about their current banking? So if you think back, people didn't like the stock trading services. So E-Trade was invented, and they did really well. It was impossible to get paid online, so Peter Thiel invented and Max Levchin invented PayPal, did really well. It was almost impossible in the UK to get a small loan, so Errol Damelin invented Wonga, and I think they're worth close to $1 billion or a couple. So have a think, what are the things that don't really work for you or other people in banking? And then whether you can meaningfully change it. So if there's a way how you can make it 10 times better, then it's worth going ahead. If you can only improve a little bit, then it's going to be hard. You should always have a plan to get customers. It's hard for tech-minded people to think about customers and marketing, but if you want to launch a startup, however good you are at tech, you have to be very good at marketing and getting customers. In banking or financial services startups, you need to think about trust and experience. Again, it's not hard, it's just complicated. And you have to be really fast. You have to be faster than the people behind you. And most of all, you need to have fun on the way. So this is our last campaign that was out in London. It basically says some word here, and then it says your banker is overcharging you on money transfers. Thank you very much. I